Hi, I wanted to say a few things about the lectionary gospel text for this coming Sunday, the fifth Sunday in Lent, March 29th. I've been going through the past couple of days with this story in my mind and wanted to share some reflections in the hope that maybe it might resonate with you as it has with me. It's a lengthy story, one that might be familiar to you. It is the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from death. You'll find it in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. I'm just going to read a portion of it. Jesus has already come, found that Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days, and he has spoken with Lazarus' sister Martha, and now is going to encounter his other grieving sister Mary. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." What strikes me right now is how this text invites us to examine our own grief. We're surrounded by grief right now. Of course, it doesn't often get to the forefront because there are other things that do, like our worry, our anxiety, information gathering, safety precautions, praying for ourselves and for others. And yet our grief is there in big and small ways. We grieve the loss of golf games and grandchildren's hugs, the loss of visits with Dad in the care facility, birthday celebrations, school musicals, family vacations. Now, we feel guilty even mentioning these losses when there are others who are fighting for their lives and grieving the loss of loved ones. And yet all this grief is still real, and our gospel lesson speaks right to it. These two sisters are grieving the loss of their brother in their own unique ways. And in the midst of her grief, Mary has the courage to look at Jesus and say, "If you had been here, this wouldn't be happening." In the last couple of weeks, I've heard and seen a whole bunch of people saying that the crisis we're facing is God's punishment on faithless people. And I can't help but think about Bishop Sam Gray's message to our Moravian church this past Sunday, that it's not the why or the what that matter right now, it's the who that matters. And when we think about the who, I would ask you to consider all you know God to be. Do we have the faith to admit that at least some of us have been having the same thought as Mary? God, if you had been here, this wouldn't be happening. All the suffering, all the fear, all the anxiety, if you had been here. But just look at how Jesus responds when Mary says this. It's kind of astonishing, really. Let me be honest, if I had the power to come into a situation like that one, or like the one we're living in today, and make it all better, raise the dead, end the virus, well, I'm pretty sure that I'd be leading with that. No, don't be sad. It's okay. I'll fix it. I'll make it all better. But what does Jesus do? He comes alongside Mary and Martha, and he weeps. The Savior of the world enters into their suffering and cries real tears of sorrow for himself, for them, for their grief. There's our picture of God for today as well. The one who is alongside us, suffering with all God's people, crying real tears of grief. And yet Mary and Martha and Lazarus' story doesn't end there. It ends in resurrection, in new life that they could never have imagined. The same God who came alongside them in their grief also had the power to bring life out of death. And that same God continues to bring new life now in ways that we could never imagine from where we sit today. So please acknowledge your fear and your grief. When you weep, open yourself to feel the presence of a grieving Savior right there with you. Have faith to ask the difficult questions and state your doubts to God boldly. And when you can least imagine it, expect new life and resurrection hope, which will prevail in every way.